thanks a million for doing this, first of all. Um,
Yes,
I
thanks
really
for inviting
appreciate you
me.
taking the time out. It's
This is
exciting.
awesome. Hmm.
Are you drinking coffee there now?
I am. I just got my coffee. I figured I needed some for this podcast.
It makes sense. Do you drink a lot of coffee?
Not a lot. I don't drink a lot of caffeine actually. Um, Lately I've been having a little bit, but most of the time just decaf in the morning.
And like, is that was that like throughout, say, medical school and training and everything? Were you always kind of
Mm.
conscious of not having too much?
I used to drink a lot more caffeine. I would have like coffee in the morning and then sometimes, yeah, I would have a lot more caffeine and then sometimes in the afternoon too. But I would go like, even in med school, I would go a month or so and I would just go no caffeine for a while. And I always was surprised, even in some of my hardest rotations when I'd have to be up at like 4 in the morning. Um, Once you get the caffeine out of your system, I would feel great. Like it didn't feel like it was hard, and I would feel more clear and more even throughout the day. Um, and so then I just started getting in the habit of going mostly with decaf because I love coffee and I love how
Mm.
it tastes, but I just find that I'm usually a lot more even without the caffeine, and then when I need it, it works better.
Yeah, that's fair. I like hearing about guests like coffee memories. Then it's something where, maybe there was like coffee was maybe not central to the memory, but on the periphery somewhere, like of somewhere you were or someone you were with. Is there anything that springs to mind for you?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I love, so like one of my favorite places in the world is I grew up in Michigan, and my parents had a cottage up in northern Michigan that was on a lake. Well, that's still where they live for half the year. And it's just one of my favorite places because I have so many great childhood memories there. And I love to go whenever I can, but I just love sitting on the porch there overlooking the lake and drinking coffee. Like that's
Yeah, sounds
I
idyllic.
guess, and it just reminds me of like everything that that place means to me. So I guess that would be
Yeah, it's not a bad one in fairness. Um,
mine.
with podcasts, then, sorry.
This was a cool coffee shop though. I just recently moved to Lexington, Kentucky, and this coffee shop that I got this coffee from today is called Cup of Commonwealth. And they do a cool thing where you can buy a coffee for someone else and you just buy like this
Oh, the
drink
sleeve
holder.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you write on it like this is for someone who like I wrote today, I got one and I said, this is for someone who needs a hug today or something. Like
Oh, that's
they
cool.
have a lot for like pandemic, like this is for a teacher or this is for a healthcare worker or whatever it is. And then, if you fit that description, you can use it, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were like, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool to open a coffee shop?" And we were talking about like names, like what would you call it?
Mm-hmm.
And like we bounced a couple of names back and forth. Every time a name came back, it was like, "Oh, that's a good name." An immediate search was like, "Nah, someone has it. It's gone." Like because there's so many of them now. It's so hard to
That's
pick.
so
Like,
true. It's sort of
yeah,
like CrossFit affiliates now. It's like so hard to come up with an original name because there's so many.
yeah. I wonder has anyone ever thought of calling it like CrossFit? Because surely nobody's done that.
I don't think there is one.
Yeah. Um, with podcasts then, so Pursuing Health has like, I mean, did you expect when you started it off that it would grow to like as popular as it is and like having the range of guests that you've had and stuff?
I don't think I knew what to expect when I started it. I started it almost, yeah, just about 6 years ago now. And it was sort of on a whim. I think it was something that kind of scared me because I was always a little nervous about just putting myself out there. And I'd started a blog, which I wrote maybe 6 posts on over the course of a few years. And I had just finished going to a Tony Robbins seminar. And so at the end of that, you're just feeling so pumped up and like inspired and I can do anything. And so I had gone out to lunch with a friend, actually, Mo Nakvi, who's one of the founders of Beyond the Whiteboard. And he just suggested, like, why don't you start a podcast? And I thought, that's a great idea. That's perfect for me because I love having one-on-one conversations with people. And I felt like I had met so many amazing people through CrossFit that I wanted to share those conversations with a wider audience. And I was also at the point where I knew that was going to be my last season competing. And it just seemed like a great way for me to stay in touch with the CrossFit community. And so initially it was just, let's put something out there and try to be consistent. I think that the podcast people I talked to for advice beforehand were just which is always said, consistency is the most important thing. As long as you commit to a schedule and like keep up your schedule. And so I've done that. I haven't missed an episode, and it's just been so much fun. And I think it's been really fun for me too to evolve. Like you mentioned, at first it was all CrossFit athletes, really performance-based stuff. And as I've evolved and gone through med school and residency, it's become a lot more about general health content, and just sharing stories from the community. And it's been so much fun. It's one of the best decisions I ever made.
Do you ever get nervous, like with, so obviously, say speaking from experience, you know that if there's certain people you have on, like no matter what the content is, it's going to be a hit because people will hunt out that person, and like their fans will come and listen to it, and then your own regulars will come and listen to it. Do you ever get nervous when you have someone who's like maybe a little bit less known, that it's like, oh man, what if like people don't listen to this one and then don't come back?
Well, I've actually found, because I've been featuring a lot more what I call like stories, which are just people, like regular people from the community who have really incredible health stories. I mean, the CrossFit community is a gold mine for these things, and I think it's so important to share them. And so that has been great for me, one, because I learn so much from everyone and how inspiring, they are, and what the qualities about them that have allowed them to overcome whatever challenges they have. But two, the podcast gives them a platform to be able to share their story and influence other people. And I find that actually those are really well listened to and downloaded in comparison to my other episodes. Obviously, if you have someone like Matt Fraser on, or Rich Froning, like, of course, those are going to be, downloaded a lot more and more listened to. But I've just loved being able to feature just kind of like the everyday average person who has an amazing story.
Yeah, no, that's something that definitely resonates with me, because I think it can be frustrating for me sometimes. Like obviously mine's a lot smaller than yours, but like it, say I could interview someone, I'd be like, man, that's such a good story. Like, and then that there's maybe 20% of people who usually listen just won't hear it because they'll breeze past it to the next one. It's such a shame. Like you'd love to just be like,
right.
oh, please just listen to this one,
But this
because I
one's
promise
really
you.
good. Yeah. Yeah. And
What
it's hard
are
because I try to do that, but then it's hard for people to like believe it, because I almost feel like I say that with every episode. I'm like, oh, this one's so good, you have to listen.
What are some of the more challenging aspects you found with it then, with like say starting it and running it and keeping it going?
I think, I really have been committed to the consistency, but sometimes it had been hard, especially when I was in med school and residency, just because of the logistics of it. But I was lucky to try to often like batch interviews. Like if I would go to the CrossFit Games for a week, I would try to record a ton of content that would then last for a little while, which is, has pluses and minuses. One, it's great when you can do them in person, but then sometimes, especially if it's time sensitive and it comes out a month or two later, it's not as relevant. But now with COVID, pretty much everything has been virtual, which makes it a lot easier to stay on a regular schedule. And I think I've just learned so much as an interviewer too. I think I still have so much room to learn and grow, but trying to interview in such a way that allows the person's story to come through and really highlights them in the way that is going to allow them to influence listeners or have a positive impact on listeners. It's such an art. And I go back and listen to some of my early episodes when I was so nervous and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I've definitely grown there, but I think every time after I record an episode, I'm always thinking like, gosh, I wish I would have asked this differently or been more prepared for this or whatever. So it's always a process.
Yeah, fair play for going back to listen to an old episode. I don't think I could do that.
I don't
think I could
voluntarily do
listen to
it, but
last week's
sometimes I
episode.
catch it. Yeah, it's hard to hear, especially those first couple.
Yeah. Has there been any like maybe sneaky rewarding moments that you've had? So obviously like there's things that I guess if you said to anyone like, oh, what do you think are the good things that would happen if you start a podcast? Is like people would have a list of like 5 things that like are really obvious. Is there anything that's like kind of taking you a bit by surprise that's happened? Maybe something you didn't anticipate as much?
That's a great question. I think it definitely has opened doors. And I think like the things that still surprise me, which I guess it shouldn't come as a surprise, but just when I get emails from people with even like, the episodes that you don't expect are going to have an impact or whatever. And you get an email from people saying, how much it helped them or how it had a positive impact on them. That is what I think. It still surprises me. It shouldn't, but it still surprises me every time, because I just feel like, wow, it's something that it's not, so easy for me to do, but it's something I can do. It doesn't take a lot of like time and energy every week and put out there. And if it can influence other people in a positive way, then that's why I keep doing it and why I do what I do.
Yeah. I was looking up, so your record in CrossFit is ridiculous. Like, so you won regionals like 4 times and once on a team, and then you won the Invitational twice with Team
Mhm.
USA, and you podiumed twice at the games on your own, and you've never finished outside the top 5, and you've only
Mhm.
recently had Carrie Pierce like finally take the highest
Yes,
American female off you. Like,
go USA.
it's insane, like the level of, like you mentioned consistency with the podcast, but the level of consistency of performance is ridiculous, especially considering in the middle there you took a year off to
Mhm.
focus on school. Like, it's crazy high performance levels.
Yeah, I think that that's just probably one of my qualities that made me good at CrossFit, is just that I'm very consistent in general. And what I think sets someone up to do well in CrossFit is I've never been a standout at any one thing, but I'm well-rounded and have good consistency across the board, whether it's in my, physical skills or different domains of CrossFit, or whether it's just training and being super consistent there. Um, but I think, yeah, it just kind of set me up really well. And to have, I had so many great opportunities that allowed it all to happen. I think in part me starting when I did was huge. Like I found CrossFit in 2009 and my first games was 2010. And that was just such a huge growth trajectory for the games in general. It was like 2010 to 13, 14, 15. And to be able to grow alongside the competitors, it was just amazing. Because I think now, if I had started now, it would have taken me several years, many, many years to get to that level. Whereas like in my first year, I was in the games, and then I was just sort of growing alongside everybody else. And just got lucky that I had a great affiliate when I first started, a great coach, and great sort of like people and support surrounding me. So yeah, it's crazy. Sometimes it seems like so long ago, and then sometimes it seems like just yesterday, but it is crazy still to look back and think like, wow, that really did happen.
In 2015, then you announced that was going to be your last season, and I also read
Mhm.
around the same time that you said that it's the best you've ever felt, or like the most
Yeah.
prepared, the most ready you've ever felt. Is it, like, was there any reluctance to make that announcement, knowing how good you felt? It was like, maybe I should just hold off and not say anything until I see what happens.
Well, I didn't really have a choice at that point. So I knew the other good thing about me starting when I did was I started competing in CrossFit at the same time I was applying to med school and going down that path. And at that time, the games weren't that big. There wasn't huge sponsors in 2010. Like it wasn't something that I knew I could make a career out of. And so I
Mm,
continued down the medical school path, and I'm so grateful I did, because I think if I had waited or delayed med school, we may be sitting here talking today and I would not be a doctor. I think I could have very easily just continued with competing and rode that out as long as I could. But I knew it was something that was important to me. And so um, it just, it just was something that like I'm glad I did alongside competing. And because of that, I knew I had a limited time period of when I could compete. I was able to extend my medical school one additional year, and that's how I was able to compete in 2015. And so it never was a question for me about like whether or not I would continue competing past that year. But for me, every year that I was competing, it was such a big an experience of mental growth and confidence in myself. And so in 2015, I really felt like even though the season didn't end as I anticipated with my Achilles tear, I felt like, wow, I finally have achieved everything I wanted to achieve from a like personal standpoint from CrossFit, like having such confidence in myself, feeling like I was the fittest I had ever been, having the best year of training, achieving a lot of milestones in training that I've been chasing for a long time. And so even if the outcome wasn't as I had hoped for, at the end of the day with standings and podiums, like for me, I was still able to like walk away from it feeling like I did everything that I could. And I was really happy with my
yeah.
career, and I was really excited to move forward with medicine. So
It's like you mentioned there that it obviously didn't go as planned the last year. I was actually watching uh on YouTube this morning with my wife. So like it was
Yeah.
just incredible. Just for anyone that might not know, so it was 2015 regionals, and you were doing box jumps, basically box jump
Yes.
overs, and you were doing kind of, I guess, like rebound, like quick rebound jumps, and just like snapped your Achilles.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like on the video, well, not funny, that's the wrong word, but it's interesting on
It
the
was
video.
funny.
You you look like, you almost trip, but get onto the
Yes.
box, get over the other side, and you're kind of looking back as if like, oh, I'm after like kicking something with my heel, or I'm after flicking something
Yes.
or whatever. And it was only when you kind of, I guess, stumbled to the other side, and like you almost looked like you were drunk, like you just
Yeah. I
couldn't
was like,
hold your
what
own
is
weight.
going
Like,
on?
was it an immediate realization out there of like, okay, shit, I'm in major trouble?
It was a lot of confusion, but yes, I think it's pretty classic for what people experience when they tear their Achilles, where it really feels like someone just hit you in the back of the leg. Like I thought that someone's barbell rolled over into my lane and landed on my leg. And that's why I looked back. And I think that's, when you can capture it on video, I think that's what you see oftentimes. And
Mm.
so then I was just confused, like, wow, there's nothing there. What was that just hit me in the back of the leg? And then by the time I got over to the other end of the box and I realized I couldn't really use my foot the way that I wanted to, I was just like really confused. And then I think it hit like I knew what had happened, because tearing my Achilles was always sort of my worst fear deep down, but it just took a few minutes for it to sink in. And I think by the time I started the workout finished and I started walking across the floor, like I knew that's what happened.
Yeah. Like the next workout was so like my wife had never seen that before, and
Oh yeah.
like we were sitting watching it, and she, like, when you came out, so like most people would just walk away, like they just wouldn't
Yeah.
come back, or
Yeah.
they'd maybe come out and wave, and that was it. Like, and I think she was kind of expecting that to happen, that you'd come out and just be like, okay, thanks guys, like thanks for coming, and then like sit down. But like, so the next workout was a handstand walk, but you had to, I guess a harsh part on you was that you had to run to the far end first, which just seems
Yeah.
fucking
I didn't
unnecessary
think
now when you
about
look
that
back at it.
beforehand.
So you had to run down, turn, like handstand walk back the length of the hall or the stadium or whatever, and then turn
Mhm.
and handstand walk back. And
Mhm.
everyone took off sprinting, and you kind of hobbled along. And my wife goes, "Oh no, I can't watch this," and like walked off. She was like, "No, sorry, I'm out. Like I can't watch someone like suffer like that." But like I said, a lot of people would have kind of given up. I think by the time you got to the rig, the halfway mark, like
Mhm.
three or four people were pretty much on top of you there, coming back on their
Mhm.
handstand walk. Like the I kind of can't really let the opportunity to talk to you about it go by without saying like how impressive it is to literally stay in your own lane, like literally focus. Because it would have been
Yeah.
so easy to be like, oh fuck this, like they're going to be finished before I even get to the end.
Yeah.
And then obviously it paid off in the end. Like incredibly, you came fourth, which is just
That is
baffling.
kind of
Like
incredible. Yeah.
I was like to my wife, like, I really think you should watch it though. And she came back and was like, gee, she's after passing a lot of people. And then it was like, I mean, whatever, the weird way to the boot is one thing, but then like it must have been playing on your mind as well of like, shit, if I fall left, I'm in major trouble here, because I can't just like, catch myself and kick up again. You're like, you're gonna crumple if you land on that side, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it's so interesting how that all happened and how that was the next event, because I had been practicing a lot of weighted handstand walks with my gymnastics coaches, where I'd put ankle weights on and practice handstand walks to get ready for that event. So when I had the boot on, and also I grew up doing gymnastics, so handstand walks have always been something that's come more naturally to me. And when I had the boot on, it honestly didn't feel very different or very like uncomfortable, because it was something I think I had been practicing for. And so I remember sitting over in the medical area after the previous event, and I think it was Adrian Bosman who came over and asked like if I was going to do the next event. And I remember thinking, well, it's a handstand walk. Of course I can do that. I don't need my foot for that. And so I was like, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. And then when I got out to the floor, I totally didn't even think through the fact that you had to go walk to the other end of the floor. And so as soon as everyone started running, I was like, oh, crap, I forgot about this. I'm going to be way behind. But I really don't think, when you say staying in your own lane, I really don't think that I ever even thought about what anyone else was doing, because by
Mm,
that point I knew, and this is what made the whole rest of the competition so fun for me, is it wasn't at all about my placement anymore. Like for the first time I had been in a competition where there was zero pressure about how I finished. It did not matter at all. Like, all that mattered to me was that I was out there, and I really wanted to do the handstand walks unbroken. Like, I wanted to get all the way across and then come down and kick back up and come all the way back and do them unbroken. That's all I cared about, even if it was super slow, even if I got last place. Like, that was sort of my personal goal. And so that's what I was focused on. And I really didn't even pay much attention to where everybody else was. And so that's sort of how the rest of the competition went for me. It was all just about like going out there and having fun, which was totally different from previous regionals where there's so much pressure. You know, it's your one chance to qualify for the games, and it's oftentimes like you're not able to really enjoy it. So that to me was a blast. And I didn't worry too much about falling on it, because just with my gymnastics background, I was used to knowing how to fall or how to land so that I wouldn't land on that foot. And the boot was very protective too.
Yeah. So mad to look
But I
at
think
them.
they changed the rules for the CrossFit Games after that season, where now there's pretty strict rules about if you have an injury and medical kind of like rules you out, you're not able to continue in the competition just for risk of injuring further.
Yeah, I say just insurance, I'd say as well. Like,
yeah, so I'm glad I got to do it while it was still legal.
I was looking up though as well. It's not the first time that you've had injury, I guess, like try to derail things for you either. Like I remember, I kind of reread it today, but I remember a while back reading that you wrote a letter to yourself for it was in Morning Chalk Up.
Yeah.
And you had a similar like done it 1,000 times movement in gymnastics cause an accident as well.
Yeah, it was so interesting how that injury sort of parallels this one, because that was really my first big injury in life. And I think I was a junior in high school. And, you know, when you're young and you're in high school and you think that, for me, gymnastics was everything. And so this injury just crushed my whole world. Like, I had never experienced something like that before that was like, okay, you're done for the season. You're not going to be able to compete. And to me, that was everything. And so it was a beam routine. I had done a million times, and it was in a competition, and I basically just kind of like missed my hands on a move, and my foot came around really fast and I broke my foot. And I remember feeling like it was broken, but the first time I went to the doctor, they x-rayed it right away and it didn't show up, I think because it was too soon. And so then I was kind of hobbling around and trying to make it work. It wasn't getting better. And I went back and found out it was broken later. So I was basically in a cast for the rest of the season. And for me, that was such a defining moment, I think, in my life that helped me even to be prepared for this Achilles injury. Was I had this moment where I was like, I can just feel sorry for myself and not, that I'm not able to compete this season and be sort of like down and negative, or I can make the most of the situation and try to be positive and do everything I can to support my teammates and help our team have the best possible season. And so that's really what I focused my energy on, and it made such a difference. And then I ended up being ready to come back and compete in the track season a few months later. And it was just so great to be able to really be there for my teammates like that. There's even a picture we had a pep rally at the end of our season where we would do a routine in front of the whole school. And I had a bright pink cast on, and they surprised me by wrapping all of their legs in bright pink tape so that they were matching for our pep rally. It was so cute.
Yeah.
But that experience, I think, just really helped me understand the importance of attitude when you're faced with adversity, and how much your attitude and how you approach the situation and try to make it positive can really go on and then influence everyone around you.
Yeah, like it's funny, even Morning Chalk Up today, they've started sharing like quotable kind of mindset things. And one of them was like, the same water that makes a potato soft makes a egg hard. And it's like it's
It
interesting.
was so true. Yeah, I
Um,
love that.
but like from reading that the letter that you wrote, and then like you've obviously cranked up pressure on yourself for a long time. Like, so even like say gymnastics there, you were obviously like it's like gymnastics is a high pressure environment, I guess, anyway. Like, and it's so singular. It's just you. Like, it's like golf almost, where it's like the smallest little thing throws everything off. And then in
Right.
college, you seemed very focused on the academics and like wanting to do as good as you could possibly do, if not better. And then in CrossFit, you have the same, where there's this like constant pressure. Is that like, do you think that pressure is something that drives you or that you thrive in? Or do you think that if you could go back, would you do anything differently now with the benefit of hindsight?
That's such a great question. I don't know if I would do anything differently, because I think it's all made me into the person that I am today. But I do think now, and especially recently, I've learned and started to understand some of the negative impacts that putting so much pressure or for on yourself to strive for perfection can have, and putting so much weight into these achievements. Like for me, it was always, and I don't know where it came from. You know, my parents never really put pressure on me. It was just something internally within me that always wanted to do, like, to be perfect. Like I was always kind of like a teacher's pet in grade school, and I always wanted to get perfect grades, and gymnastics is all about perfection. And then in college, the same. I think, especially before I found CrossFit, I was taking it way too far in terms of just studying and trying to be so perfect with grades and tests. And when I found CrossFit and started training, even though I was training twice a day, a lot of days, I ended up getting the same grades. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm studying a lot less, but I'm still getting the same grades. So I must have been wasting a lot of time before. But yeah, I think I allowed that almost to become my, like, the thing that I cared about the most. And it came at a detriment to other things that were really important to me in life, or that I knew were important to me deep down and I was ignoring. So just relationships, like being able to put other people first a lot of the times, like especially that time period of competing in CrossFit and going through med school, I was so not balanced. And I think when you're going for a goal of like trying to be the best in the world at something, you're not going to be balanced, and that has to be your singular goal. But for me, it always felt like I was at odds with the person who I wanted to be, because I wasn't there for the people in my life. I didn't have strong relationships and friendships because I was always thinking about myself, like how much sleep do I need? Like I need to go home because I need to get to bed, or I need to eat this, or what's training going to be tomorrow. And so it felt very selfish. And I think there's part of that that's good and necessary, but I let it become so much that it took away from other things that were just important for me as a person. And it kind of, it could be negative. So now the way I think of it is, like, for me, I've just sort of reprioritized things. Like for me, relationships and the type of person that I am are the most important. And then I also still am striving to do my very best every day in everything that I do. But if I get, like, yesterday morning, a friend called me at like 9 a.m, who, I hadn't talked to. She had just had a baby. Like I knew her time was super like, for her to be able to have time to call me was a blessing. And so part of me was like, in my old life, I probably would have said, oh, this is like when I'm supposed to be working. I'm not going to answer. I'll call her back later when I'm not working. Whereas now I'm like, no, this is, I really want to connect with this person. Her time is super valuable. She's got young kids. I'm going to pick up the phone. We had a great conversation. It made the whole rest of my day better. And I still got my work done later in the day. So it's like those little decisions that you make throughout the day that I think shift so many things.
Do you think then, like, say when you see Matt Fraser and Jacob Hepner and people like that, like, retiring, where some people might be like, oh shit, I wasn't expecting that? Are you kind of like, yep, I totally get why you'd need to just have a finite amount of time giving up everything?
I totally get it. And I think it's so hard. It takes a person who really knows themselves and knows what they want to be able to make that decision, because I think it's almost easier to just keep going because you don't. And I think, like, for me, it helped a lot that I took 1 year off in the middle. Like I took the 2013 season off for school, and that helped me to realize, like, okay, CrossFit isn't everything. Like, because it becomes such a big part of your life that, like, you can't imagine your life without it. And so I think it's really hard for people to let go, even if maybe there are other things that become more important or should be more important. It's really, really hard to make that transition. And so I can see for sure why Matt Fraser was ready to retire, just being as successful as he was, and the toll that pressure takes on you year after year after year, not just physically, but more so mentally. I know when I finally, quote unquote, retired, it was like after that Achilles injury, it was like a huge weight off my shoulders that I didn't even know I had been carrying for so many years. It's the little things of, like, waking up every single day and thinking about the training that you have to do, or, sleep, or whatever it is. And so finally having that weight lifted, I finally felt like, wow, I can actually, like, start caring about other people again, or putting people first, or like going out to dinner with my friends and not feeling bad about staying out late, or whatever it is. I think you don't even realize how much stress and pressure that puts you under until you let go of it.
Yeah. Your relationship with social media is something like I find interesting. So I say recently you've really stepped back from it, I suppose, since last year, and you've shared
Mm-hmm.
some of the reasoning behind it, like more recently, I suppose. Like it must be a difficult one because I know as someone who's like has a podcast as well, and like you obviously
Yeah.
have brands and relationships and stuff you need to maintain, and then like on the one hand you've got like there's aspects that you obviously love because you get that connection and you get the sharing and the community and stuff, but then on the other hand
Mm-hmm.
there's that, I suppose, whether it's rational or irrational, you've still got that pressure to show this like kind of rose tinted life, and that largely seems to be the reason why you seem to have stepped back. Is that fair?
Yeah, in part. I mean, I think I made some realizations last November that I realized that I wasn't aware of how much of a negative it had been impact it had been having on me. And not terrible. Like I always felt like I had a relative, like an okay relationship with social media, but it was realizing this pressure, like feeling this constant pressure to post regularly. And if I didn't post, I felt bad about it. Or a lot of times posting something just for the sake of having something to post, because I knew Instagram liked that. And if you don't post frequently enough, like you're going to fall off their algorithms or whatever it is. And so a lot of times then I would be posting things that were not really meaningful or impactful to me, but were just for the sake of having something up there, which was not the kind of, I think, what I wanted to put out in the world. And then realizing too, as much as I didn't think that I cared about likes and followers and all those things, like realizing that it does, no matter how much you don't care or attach meaning to that, it has such an impact on you, even subconsciously, like when you see it. And that's the way that these apps are designed, is to make them addictive and to give you this dopamine rush every time you see people liking or commenting on your posts. And so I took a step back. I actually deleted my account, completely deleted it. And by some miracle, I ended up getting it back, which never happens. But then when I got it back, I didn't go on for probably a month or two at all. And it felt so liberating, just because I would spend so much time, like it's embarrassing to say, but it just, when you pick up your phone, it's like you're in this motor pattern of like, click right here, and this is where Instagram is, and it comes
Oh,
up
have
and
you
you
ever
scroll through
moved your
for,
app?
I have, yeah.
Oh, it
And that has
scares
helped.
me when I move
But
my app. It
sometimes,
scares me how I still
yeah,
go back to, and without like I just blink and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, and I'm in the wrong
right.
place. Oh, it's scary.
But then it's like, it doesn't take that long after you move it for yourself to relearn where the new place is, which is really scary.
Yeah.
And just like, how much time I would spend just scrolling or looking, and then the impact that that stuff has on you, and realizing like how many accounts I was following that were not necessarily in adding like positivity to my life, but were maybe not, not the best things that I wanted to be exposing my brain to all the time. And so
Mm.
I took some time completely off, and then obviously I went through some personal growth things and decided I just wanted to share that experience, and that was something that's meaningful for me. And that has been really great to be able to share, um, and to connect with people on something that's really like deep and meaningful, and use social media to do that. And so basically I would make a post, and then I would post it, and I wouldn't even open the app for like a day. And then the next day I would go in and I would read the comments and comment back. And that was really meaningful for me. But even then I would try not to look at the likes. I would try not to look at followers. Like I still haven't scrolled the feed at all. And now I'm starting to like wrap my head around like how I want to keep using it going forward, and like just making sure that I'm posting when I have things that are meaningful, and not just for the sake of posting. And then I went through and like unfollowed a ton of accounts that I didn't feel like were necessary for me to be following anymore, and just like sort of creating boundaries for myself around using it, because I think it is such a powerful tool, and so many people are on it, and like that's how you can reach and interact and connect with people. But for me, I just want to make sure that I'm doing it in a meaningful way, and that I'm being really intentional about it, and I'm not just allowing it to kind of take control of me and how I'm behaving or using it.
Yeah, like it's interesting some of the points you make there because it definitely, like I'm very proud of say like the kind of community that I've built where it's like, it's small and like slowly growing organically, which I like. Like there's no like
Mm-hmm.
massive jumps every so often or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
like it can be very difficult to detach yourself from, like, I guess adding value or like taking value for yourself from just that number, especially when that's what, that's what the app rewards, but as well, like that's
Mm-hmm.
what brands reward. That's what, like,
Mm-hmm.
even people I approach to come on, like that is something that they will look at to be like, oh,
Yeah.
3,000, I'm not bothered with that. I'd rather go on like Talking Elite with 50,000 or whatever. Like, it's kind of, it's an interesting one to separate yourself from, but like there are, I guess, with more people like you coming out and talking about stuff and like making people aware of, like, something I did a while ago with my wife. Like we were kind of talking about one day, we were like, geez, we spend way too much time like just sitting on our phones. Like this is before
Mm-hmm.
our baby came, like we'd just be sitting on the couch and like
Mm-hmm.
easily an hour go past.
Totally.
So we started saying like, oh, we'll say out loud like what we are doing. And like
Yes. Oh, that's great.
it's so embarrassing, like where you're like,
Yeah.
I'm going to click on to, Julie's post, and it's like I'm now clicking on a person who's liked it, and I'm on their picture from 2015 when they were in like NASA or whatever, like you
Yeah.
make yourself sound like a maniac when you start like
Yeah.
consciously thinking about what you're doing. It's hilarious. Like,
It's so
um,
true. Oh, that's a great trick.
yeah, it gets pretty ridiculous pretty quickly as well. It stops you doing stuff because you're like, oh, I can't say that out loud. That I'm in like her
That's so great.
ex-boyfriend's girlfriend's like pictures from
Yeah.
Tenerife or whatever. One of the things you shared recently was like the ending of your marriage, which I guess a lot of people, like, it would have taken a lot of people by surprise, because I suppose like it's kind of like the antithesis of what the app is. Like it's that,
Yeah.
like, it's not a real app. It's not like, you're seeing everyone's highlights. And I suppose it's ironic that they brought out the highlights feature, because like that's basically all it is anyway, is like, here's the best picture I took of myself in training
Right.
yesterday, or here's my heaviest lift, or here's like really happy whatever. Like,
Yeah.
is that something that you consciously decided, like, as you say, that adding value thing, or that, like, intentional posting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, like the whole process had just been such a period of personal growth. And I know that I knew that I was not alone in this. I knew that like so many other people go through things, whether it's big things or small things that are hard, and how they grow. And so I think for me, I've always loved, even the posts that I've made in the past that have meant the most to me are when I post things that are really vulnerable. Like I just like sharing that parts of me that are real and that are not necessarily like what people expect, or like
Mm.
this perfect image or life that I'm trying to portray. And so I wanted to share that because I knew other people were going through it. And a lot of times just hearing that someone else is going through something hard, it can help so much to know that you're not alone. And so I felt like I had grown so much through it, and I wanted to be able to share my experience if it could help anyone, even in a like big way or a small way. And it has been amazing to connect with people in so many different ways since making a lot of those posts, and just see the different things that people are going through, and how like sharing about it gives each other so much strength, instead of living in this fake world where everyone thinks everyone else is doing great and there's something wrong with them because they're they're struggling or they're going through a hard time. But no, actually everybody deals with things that are really hard. And the ways that we can, that's why CrossFit's so amazing and brings people together with these such strong bonds, is because we suffer together and we are vulnerable together. We're like struggling to get our first pull up or try to do a muscle up or lift this weight, and we see each other going through those vulnerable moments, and that's what creates these really strong bonds. And so I think the more that we can do that in a real way, whether it's on social media or in real life or in other situations, like that's how we make connections with people. And at the end of the day, like that's what life is all about. It's about relationships and connections, and just like supporting each other and being there for each other and helping each other be better.
Yeah. Was it awkward with any of the brands that you work with, like for say sponsors or like podcast sponsorship stuff, to be like, oh, by the way, I'm, like opting out of social media for a while, but they're like, wait, what?
Well, actually, luckily last year I pretty much ended all kind of sponsorships. I had some sponsors for the podcast, and I decided I just wanted to move away from that, um, just for kind of like personal reasons. And so I have no attachment to any sponsors anymore, which is also sort of freeing. Like I love all the sponsors that I worked with in the past, and I always was very intentional about choosing people to work with that were brands that I used or that I really aligned with their mission. And I've had amazing sponsors, but I knew, I'm not an athlete anymore. And I also, now I'm a doctor, and I'm just really sensitive about having any type of conflict of interest or like perceived conflict of interest. And I've seen other doctors kind of using social media to promote different brands. And to me, there's just something about it that I think it's right for different people, but for me, it just doesn't feel right. Because I never want people to question whether I'm telling them about a brand or a service or a product just because I'm making money. I want it to be because like I genuinely believe in the brand or think it might help people. And so that was like a decision that I made last year that it just made all of this a lot easier because I didn't have to worry about that.
You were quite vocal during all the controversy around CrossFit like last summer, and like you're one of the, I guess, one of the louder voices calling for change. And then you were also quite vocal in your support or your optimism when Eric took over.
Yeah.
What are there changes you've seen that have like maintained your optimism or like helped it grow into a more positive mindset about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the task that Eric took on by taking over CrossFit last year, it was monumental. I mean, I think, unless you really know CrossFit or CrossFit HQ, you don't, there was literally there was not a lot of infrastructure there or like systems in place to be able, especially from like a big picture, like side, especially from the affiliates. I mean, I think the training department has been very structured and very well run always, but the rest of the company, I think just because that's how Greg's philosophy was, like he was very hands off. He wanted affiliates to be able to do their own thing. And he was so sensitive about, even sending them an email. And so there was just a lot of work to do. And I've been very impressed with what Eric has done so far. And I think he's being very intentional about bringing the right people on board. And I think that it's taking time. And I think that we're going to probably hear more and more from CrossFit as this year goes on. But I think 2021 is just such a big sort of like rebuilding, restructuring, like re-understanding who we are in this new phase of CrossFit. And I'm super optimistic about where we are going, especially towards the end of this year and then 2022. I mean, I'm so excited because I can see the pieces starting to come into place. And I know that like the work that they're putting in now is going to pay off. But I think that, we all have to have a little bit of patience and give them a little bit of grace because of sort of where they started with. And then also, the impact that COVID has had on our whole community has been huge.
I thought it was interesting. I was like rereading your post from the time about how you were saying that the changes that's needed and stuff. And I thought it was interesting that you name checked Dave as like, like all this stuff needs to change, but not Dave. And it's kind of like, it's funny because I think so many people, like he's real Marmite, like where people either love him or hate him. And there doesn't seem to be any in between. And I think a lot of people, like I kind of tend to reserve my opinion on people until I talk to them or until I know someone who has talked to them or whatever, like, but like he can be quite divisive. And I think people all obviously assumed when everything was going down, they were like, well, he's obviously in on it. Like he's obviously part of the problem if he's that high up. So I thought it was interesting that early doors, like you were keen to explain that like you don't view him as part of the problem. So it must be great for you then to see him hang on and like stay and I guess grow in his role and have his role, I guess, be handed the reins a bit more and a bit more freedom and a bit more like, well, it seems to me anyway from the outside looking in that he was basically told like, well, what's the best case scenario for you? How would you like the season to look? And that him and his team have come up with what they want. And he's got Nicole back and, like it seems to be running a lot more smoothly for him.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy to look back at that post because I think pretty much everything has happened now. Which also is to me like, I think Eric has been making the right decisions. But I was
obviously Eric's to-do list when he was walking into the building the first day.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that Dave is extremely divisive, and I think that like I don't necessarily agree with the way that he handles everything, but I do have respect for what he's done for the CrossFit Games. And I think he's an excellent programmer and excellent artist when it comes to putting that event on. And he's extremely dedicated to like the process and making it the best that it can be. But yeah, and I think maybe in that post, that was before I made that post after Nicole had already resigned, but I would 100%, I'm so happy that Nicole is back in CrossFit. And like, that gives me also so much hope for the future of CrossFit, because of all people, she is like the heart of CrossFit. Like, she will always protect everything that is good about CrossFit while also being open to change and things that will make it better. And so I think that's one of the things that made me the most excited. Like, maybe I should have put that in the post too. Like, Nicole needs to come back is one of the things.
Yeah, he obviously read your mind on that one, so it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody knew it. Everybody felt it.
I think there was a real sense of that kind of like hurrah moment as well when she was in the video for 21.1, where everyone was like, "Oh yeah, she's back for like officially doing that show."
I know. I don't know how you can not love Nicole. Like, she's just incredible.
Yeah. Well, look, we finished with a quick fire.
All right.
So they're all either or, I think. So strength or cardio?
Cardio for sure.
Row or bike?
Oh, that's tough. Bike.
Wall ball or thrusters?
Wall balls.
Handstand walk or handstand push up?
Handstand walk.
And team or individual?
Team is so much more fun. So much more fun.
Well, listen, thanks a million for coming on. I really, really appreciate you taking the time out. And I think it's great. I think we've covered so much there that even if you're not interested in CrossFit at all, I think there's a lot there to be taken from it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where Pursuing Health is heading.
Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I loved all of your questions, and we hit on so many great topics. So thank you. I appreciate it.